First Encounter Assault Recon is a classic first-person shooter horror game that came out back in 2005, better known as F.E.A.R. I wanted to upload a horror game this Halloween, and F.E.A.R was the first game I thought of. I played this game a few years ago, and as someone who doesn't play many horror games, I remember really liking F.E.A.R, but is it just nostalgia, or is it still worth playing? Let's find out. I don't know about you guys, but horror games kinda scare the hell out of me. I wasn't excited to play a horror game this Halloween until I thought of F.E.A.R. You see, F.E.A.R is the perfect combo of an action-packed FPS and a horror game. Oh, and there's slow motion in case this game wasn't cool enough already. But the spookiness is the first thing you get a feel for, and you ease into the horror and the gameplay really well. You get to soak in the atmosphere and see some spooky lighting. You might see a couple dead bodies and this creepy little girl, but it's nothing we can't handle. This game made me feel more tensed than scared, which is better in my opinion, meaning there aren't too many jump scares. More often than not, you'll think you're about to get jump scared, but then it just doesn't happen, which makes it scarier when it does happen.
He deserved to die. They all deserve to die.
F.E.A.R builds more tension and gets scarier the deeper you get into the game and story. A big part of it comes from the fear of dying, which I'll get into later, but a big part of it is the story developing and all the spooky, scary things surrounding it. Like, if your horror game doesn't have a spooky little girl in it, is it even a horror game? This is the homegirl Alma, and she got a lot of shit going on, to be blunt. She has all these issues, and I'm sure some of them are mental and daddy issues, which I'm totally not judging. She just won't leave me alone. But don't worry about her, she's the least of our problems. Kinda. We got the main evil guy, Paxton Fettel. He just sounds evil, doesn't he? He's the one controlling all the replica soldiers you'll be killing throughout the game. There's definitely some paranormal stuff going on here, which might explain why you sometimes see stuff that's not actually there. Not to mention you being the point man, which is the protagonist, having godlike reflexes that lets you move in slow motion. So yeah, some weird cool shit going on.
Jin, we need you up here.
But this can lead to some of the scarier and more interesting moments because you don't expect it. The story doesn't force itself on you, so there's very few moments where you don't have control and very few cutscenes. There's these phones around the map that tell you little stories and details about the characters, and those laptops with information. Even during most of the horror sections, you are in full control and can even take damage sometimes, so there's plenty of reasons to be on edge. Also, the lighting and sound design is very well done, as well as the attention to detail. F.E.A.R just does a good job at keeping you on the edge of your seat by being spooky, and not only that, if the horror has you on the edge, then the gameplay and combat will have you shitting yourself. Now this is what you've been waiting for. Blasting enemies in the face with amazingly smooth gameplay in slow motion. This is the type of satisfaction every gamer should experience. Just look at that. You're gonna tell me that's not orgasmic? If you played any of the Max Payne games, I'm sure you can relate. But man, it just hits different in F.E.A.R. The satisfying gameplay and weapons, the atmosphere, the gore, the enemies, and the aftermath you can visibly see after a gunfight, it just never gets old. Bullet holes, blood, and dead bodies everywhere, it's truly a work of art. And you get a really fun arsenal of weapons to play around with. You start out with a pistol that you can dual wield, and I'm pretty sure slow-mo dual wielding a guy in the face is one of the more badass things you can do. The SMG is pretty cool too, but I mostly prefer the assault rifle. These guns are pretty consistent at most ranges, but the shotgun is dangerously consistent at close range. You blast a poor soul who's too close to you and that man is turning into a puddle of blood. This is one of the more iconic shotguns in gaming, and it might be a hot take, but a gun I personally liked more was the HV Penetrator. Everybody talks about the shotgun, which I understand, but when I think about this game, this is the first gun I think about. The way you can just nail enemies to the wall, it's beautiful. Plus it has good range, but speaking of range, we have the ASP rifle. It's very strong and headshots are very satisfying. I just wish we could use it more because you don't get a lot of ammo for it, and in this game, you can only carry 3 weapons at a time. I actually don't mind this, but you do have a limited time with certain weapons. Like when you get the repeating cannon or the rocket launcher, which are the stronger power weapons, you better make your shots count. And shout out to the particle weapon, that thing's OP. Melee attacks are also pretty badass, but I didn't do it as much as I should have because it's just safer not to. Leaning was also another feature I kind of ignored, but maybe shouldn't have. Now, none of this would matter if the enemies and the AI sucked. But oh boy, this is F.E.A.R we talking about. This AI is better than a lot of the AI we get now. These guys are like Einstein compared to some of these modern games. They call out your location, they'll flank you, they have communication, they'll throw a grenade inside your asshole, like it's always a little different with them. They aren't programmed to do the same thing every time. They actually value their life instead of just mindlessly trying to kill you. You can hear them sound all confident before the gunfight, but when you start killing them, they start calling backup. They're not geniuses, but it's a lot of attention to detail in the AI that makes it feel that way. There's plenty of other videos going more in depth about it. There's not too many enemy types, but I personally didn't mind too much. There's the regular enemies that shoot at you, and there's a couple of other things like the turrets, and those goddamn stealth enemies that everybody hates. Not to mention that these enemies pack a punch too. We're big boys in here, so I played on the harder difficulty and they can melt you if you're not careful. I played on normal the first time around, so I decided to bump up the difficulty, and it still wasn't too bad. I'd recommend playing on normal if you're more of a horror fan, and play on a harder difficulty if you're here for the shooting. To be fair, you'll see me use slow-mo in every gunfight and play pretty slowly and carefully. But how can I not? I'm spooked and the difficulty is high. It's also just how I play, and F.E.A.R rewards curious and smart players like using your slow-mo time carefully, using the right weapon at the right time, and just exploring a bit. It's really cool how you can find permanent upgrades to your health and reflex time, so it encourages you to look around and find the smaller details. You can only carry 10 health kits at a time, and you can't regenerate your health, so finding extra items is very helpful. All this extra stuff mostly helped out with the bosses. Now the boss fights usually felt like the real challenge, and other times they weren't so bad. It mostly depends on your weapons and how safely you can kill them, but I like the tension or that oh shit moment when a boss pops up. The gameplay has a good progression just like the horror. Things like that are timeless, but something in question might be the graphics. Now this game did come out in 2005, around the Half-Life 2 era, but I personally don't mind how this game looks. I'm not a big graphics guy, and I care more that the presentation is well done, and maybe some people would argue that the setting doesn't help with the presentation, and I do see where you're coming from. Some people criticize all the office buildings and rooftops and repetitive scenery, but I think the pros outweigh the cons enough where I don't mind when I'm actually playing the game. Having good level design definitely helps with this, and this game does a good job at not holding the player's hand and not being too confusing. Those kind of criticisms don't really involve me, but I understand them. I have more of a problem with the outdated optimization. I wanted to play this game without any tweaking or doing anything extra, but my game would lag about every 10 minutes and I'd have to restart the game. Long story short, there are simple ways to fix this. I might even link one down in the description, but it seems like you have to do minor tweaking if you want to fix this problem. I don't remember dealing with this last time. You can fix some of the other things wrong with the game, like the modern resolutions not working and changing your FOV. I even had to edit this video to look normal because the resolution messed up the footage. I tried playing this game as vanilla as I can, and maybe I had more problems because of it, and I was recording, but I'd recommend saving the hassle and just looking up these fixes.
The last thing we need right now is a sexual harassment case.
But would I still recommend F.E.A.R after all this time? For me, the answer is hell yeah, especially if you're willing to do all those small fixes. Even with the problems I mentioned before, and some other ones like wishing the flashlight had its own upgrade, F.E.A.R is still a blast to play through. It's only about 5 to 7 hours long with 12 intervals, so things move pretty fast and it keeps you interested. And without any spoilers, there's some jaw-dropping moments at the end if you're paying attention, plus those last areas are worth getting to. Not to mention the heart-pounding moments with the horror and combat throughout the game. It's really impressive how this game works you up with both the combat and being spooky. For me, the replayability was pretty good too. There were a lot of parts of the game I didn't remember in a good and bad way. I did remember some of the horror parts, which made it less scary, but I was fine with that. This game probably just hits a little harder the first time, being it's a horror game. I think a faithful remaster would be great for this game. There's almost nothing wrong with the game itself, so making it easier to access and play with better graphics would be amazing. You also can't play the multiplayer for this game anymore, at least on PC, so a remaster can potentially bring that back too. It's just annoying having to deal with little things like that little bit of lag at every checkpoint, so Monolith, I'll be waiting on that remaster, but until then, you guys make sure to play F.E.A.R one of these days because it's still a blast to play through. There's still a couple of DLCs and one of them actually continues the story of F.E.A.R, but we'll see if I return to them. If you're interested in buying F.E.A.R on PC, I'd recommend a sale or using a bundle site that you trust because on Steam, the entire franchise is weirdly bundled together. I plan on reviewing F.E.A.R 2 in the future, so make sure you subscribe and stick around for that. I'd appreciate a like for me actually playing a horror game for this Halloween. My expertise mostly lies in first-person shooters, so I compromised with F.E.A.R. Drop a comment telling me what you think of F.E.A.R and if you think it still holds up. I know it doesn't feel like a modern game, but hey, it's still timeless in its own way, and this is me leaving my little mark on history.
She smells nice.
You can check on the screen for some of my other videos, not to mention my second channel. I plan on uploading some shorts with the extra gameplay. And oh yeah, I forgot to give any attention to this piece of shit. Go shove those cheesy poofs up your ass!